Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture at Pat. So today we are talking about the Yellowjackets Season 2 premiere episode, Friends, Romans, and Countrymen. Now this is going to be a spoiler-filled recap breakdown of the episode, so just want to give you guys a heads up. If you haven't seen the episode, make sure to go check it out, then come back and watch this video. We're going to be talking all things about it, theories, thoughts on certain scenes, different things like that. So I just want to, again, give you guys that heads up. I did some of these last year on the channel, so if you guys aren't familiar with that, you can go and check those out. And if you are new here, make sure you hit subscribe as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications because I'm going to be doing these videos for each one of the episodes of this season. I also had some of the cast members on the show on for interviews last year. I interviewed Kevin Alves. I also talked to Jane Widdop. I will put links to those interviews down below in the description. They'll also be at the end of this video, and I'm going to be having some of the cast from this season on for interviews as well, so I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. So again, don't want to miss any of that, but without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Season 2. So the episode opens up in the 90s where our Yellowjackets crew are now in the middle of winter out in the wilderness. We see Travis and Nat, they're getting ready to go continue looking for Javi, even though it's been 2 months since we've last seen these characters. Lottie does some Wiccan bullshit, as Nat refers to it in the episode, in order to protect the characters from what we can gather with the conversation that they have. The one thing that I did notice about this though is that Travis seems a lot more receptive to this kind of stuff, at least in the beginning of this episode. Like, I don't know, something just seems different with him. And then we see Lottie as those two are getting ready to go out and start looking for Javi. We see Lottie is drawing that symbol that we've seen a bunch of times now in the show. She's drawing that on the window. We then get some flash forwards of the Yellowjackets crew actually being rescued, and then we see Lottie being taken to the hospital where her parents, they're trying to figure out what's wrong with her daughter because ever since she's come back, she hasn't spoken, she's just been acting really weird. And me watching this episode, I'm thinking, I mean, your daughter was out in the woods stranded for 1.5 years, 2 years, whatever the exact time was again. She's been out there for a while. She's going to be kind of messed up. You gotta give her some time. So, but anyways, then we see her end up going into electrotherapy, which I thought was pretty fucked up. And when she's getting that done, we get some clips, some visions of the altar that we saw back in Season 1. Once that's all set, she comes back and she's in the hospital with another patient there, and the patient's, kind of having a little bit of a freak out. Lottie goes over and tells her to calm down, everything's going to be okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We then cut to present day where we get to meet adult Lottie for the first time, and she's talking to a group of people before we cut to the intro of the show, which I never skip this intro. I absolutely love the song. And we also get some new clips that we get to see spliced throughout the introduction as well. After the opening, we end up seeing Shauna in present day. She's being interrogated about what happened to Adam. And me sitting there watching the episode, I'm going, wait a second. Shauna didn't end up getting caught or questioned at the end of Season 1. So I was like, I feel like, did I miss something? And then you realize that it's actually Misty that's interrogating Shauna about what happened, just to prep her in case she does get brought in and questioned about what happened to Adam. But she's doing a very bad job at, giving her answers, and so Misty's trying to help her with that. The one thing that I thought about this whole scene that I thought was kind of funny, me being a Scream fan, is that she's using this voice modulator on her phone, or it's a separate device. And I just thought of Ghostface, and I was like, wouldn't that be kind of funny to see Misty as Ghostface? That'd be a nice crossover. So I just thought that was kind of funny, to throw in there. Misty ends up asking Shauna if she's gotten everything related to Adam, also her journals, if she's gotten rid of those. And when Shauna gives her answer, you can tell that Misty knows that she's lying, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on because we find out that that's the case. We then see Misty goes on to the Citizen Detective's message board, which I thought was kind of funny to include that in there. But she's on this message board. She sees there's a post about Adam, so she clicks on there, sees that someone is talking about that they were able to pull up some of Adam's recent activity, and thinks that maybe there's a mysterious lady friend that might be involved in his disappearance. And of course, Misty gets flustered, screams out no, and then she downvotes the post, which I thought was so funny. Just the delivery from Christina Ricci. She's been phenomenal as this character. She's one of my favorite characters in the show just because of how crazy the character is. You never know what's going to happen with her. And then we also get to hear Elijah Wood, his character, for the first time on the show. Shauna then ends up coming home and she sees her daughter Kelly and her boyfriend are there watching TV, goes over, tries to make some small talk, but ends up having an awkward confrontation with her daughter. And you can just tell that Kelly knows that something is going on, that her mom had something to do with the disappearance of Adam, and she's going to figure out what it was. We then flash back to the 90s, and it's at this point in the episode, this is when we find out that Shauna has officially lost her mind because she's in the meat shack with Jackie's dead body having a conversation while the rest of the group is in the cabin, and we end up meeting some new characters there. So Jackie and Shauna, they're having a conversation, and Jackie wants to know how things got started with Jeff in the first place. They end up talking, and Jackie finds out that Shauna was the one who actually made the initial move and kissed Jeff. And so Jackie's asking her, why did you do it? Tell me why you did it. Shauna gets frustrated with her, shoves her, and then realizes she's actually shoved her dead body in real life onto the ground. She's fallen over. My initial thought watching the episode, just because it was a frozen body, I thought she might have hit the ground and like her whole head might have cracked. But she picks her up, and you just see that there's a missing piece. Her ear has fallen off, so she's trying to fix that real quick. We then go back to the present day where Shauna is looking in her safe. As I had mentioned before, she still has Adam's license and some of his stuff from his wallet. So she ends up giving a call to Jeff, who's at work, because she realizes there's a key in there, which is a key to his art studio. And she tells Jeff that they have to go there and check it out because she's not sure of what could possibly be inside there. We then see Ty. So she tries to go to school where Sammy's at and surprise him with a new dog because obviously we know what happened last season. Well, we know as the audience, but Ty thought that the dog just ended up running away. Meanwhile, when this happens, Simone comes over freaking out on Ty because she was the one who actually found the sacrifice room last season where you saw the dog's head, you saw the heart, and you saw the creepy doll in there. She's freaking out on Ty, saying that she needs to get some help, and if she doesn't, she's going to go to the press. Meanwhile, Ty, you look at her, and she clearly doesn't know what's going on, or at least gives that impression. And so there's definitely something still very weird going on with Ty, which we saw glimpses of that last season. We then flash back to the 90s again, where we see that Travis and Nat, they're out looking for Javi once again, where you see Travis, he thinks that he's found Javi's body and goes over and you see kind of a quick glimpse of looks like a dead Javi there. And I was like, oh shit, they found him. But then you realize, or Nat tells him that it's just a dead fox. And then you see the bones that are sitting there. So you can tell that Nat believes at this point that Javi is dead because it's been 2 months since they've seen him. And I mean, just with the harsh conditions out there, it would kind of be hard to believe that he would have survived. I mean, it's definitely possible, but it's like if you haven't found the body by now, probably a pretty good chance he's dead. Maybe he got eaten by that bear that we saw. I don't know. So you can tell that Travis is still in denial about that. But meanwhile, Nat goes, she's like, oh, I got to mark this tree. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes too. Back in present day though, Misty ends up going to the motel where Nat was last seen, trying to figure out what has happened to her, as we saw in the finale of season 1. So she's trying to gather information on this. There's this guy sitting at the desk, and the whole interaction between these two characters I thought was hilarious because this guy is having none of Misty's shit, and he's really starting to test her patience. Finally, she threatens him and says that she's got 2 days off from work, so she can just sit here, and she's got like a really large bladder. I was just dying at this whole interaction. So finally he gives in and tells her that Nat left in the middle of the night. We then see Shauna and Jeff end up going to Adam's studio. They find the place, and once they get inside, you see that there are paintings of Shauna just all over the place. And I'm watching the episode going, yeah, this isn't fucking creepy at all. Nothing sketchy about this. Definitely something weird going on with this Adam character. Jeff at one point makes a comment where he says, so did you pose for him? And she goes, no. I mean, he was understandable to think that though, just the way that some of the poses in these pictures. But yeah, just what they find in here is really freaking weird. So definitely makes me think that there's a little something weird or more information that we don't know about this Adam character. Or maybe he could just be a guy that was just really obsessed with her. Who knows? Back in the 90s, we end up having a moment where Crystal and Misty's outside trying to gather water, ends up freaking out on Crystal because she's singing before Crystal tells Misty that, hey, I can maybe help you learn how to sing better. And you just get this little moment between those two characters that I thought, that look on Misty's face where she thinks that maybe she's possibly made a friend here. So I like that connection, and overall, even though it's just kind of a brief introduction to the character, we saw her a little bit earlier on in the episode too, but just something about the character I really liked. She's a little weird for sure, but I like the character, so I hope we get to see more of her later on in the season. We then see Nat. She ends up going to talk to Coach, and we see that they've been mapping out an area of where they've been hiking so far up to this point these past 2 months, looking for food, but also looking for Javi. And again, she just kind of reiterates that she thinks at this point, Javi is probably dead. Back in the present day, Misty ends up going into the motel room where Nat was staying at and finds out that there are some pieces of wood that are broken down on the floor, so realizes that something obviously happened. She sees there's a security camera outside, and so obviously she's going to try and hack that security camera footage to find out what happened to Nat. And then we do finally see adult Nat. She is tied up on this bed in this cabin, this building or whatever, when one of Lottie's group members comes into the room to give her food, but Nat ends up getting her to uncuff one of her hands. We then get a moment in this episode that just completely caught me off guard, but it's probably one of my favorite music drops so far in the show just because it was a song that I grew up listening to. So we see Jeff in present day. He's in his car, and all of a sudden, Papa Roach's Last Resort comes on, and he just starts jamming out in the car, and I was like, fuck yeah. One of my favorite things about the show, obviously growing up in the 90s, is the soundtrack, what we got, and just in this episode was amazing. But not only that, the score to the show, I think, is very important, and some of the tracks here that we get for the score in this episode, just that tribal, animalistic sounding music, really worked for me. So I need to pick that up on vinyl at some point. We then end up seeing Shauna. She takes her journals and Adam's license and stuff and ends up putting it on the grill and lighting it on fire, trying to get rid of everything. But I just knew watching it at that point, I was like, that not everything's going to burn. There's going to be something left behind for sure. And sure enough, that happens. We then see that Ty ends up going home and she finds the room that Simone was talking about. So she sees the previous dog's head, which I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but she sees the previous dog head, the creepy doll and everything. And obviously she freaks out because it seems like she doesn't know what's going on at the moment. And I felt so bad because she has her current dog, she's holding him, and she's like, this was a mistake, I'm going to do better this time. And meanwhile, the dog is looking at the head of this other dog, and I was just there sitting like, oh my god, this poor fucking dog. It's like, get me the hell out of this house. We then cut back to the 90s again, where we see Travis and Nat, they're sitting by the fire, and Travis finally acknowledges, he realizes that Nat probably thinks that Javi is dead at this point. And Nat says, yeah, I mean, it's been 2 months. I just think with, the weather, how it's been out there, what are the chances that he's still alive? And then all of a sudden, Travis ends up he starts freaking out. He's having like some sort of a panic attack or something. Lottie ends up coming over to try and calm him down. But while she's trying to calm him down, telling him to breathe, Travis starts having these weird visions and stuff. When he finally comes to, Lottie tells him that Javi is actually still alive. And so Nat naturally freaks out on that because she's like, why are you giving him this false hope? So, I don't know. My gut feeling is actually telling me that I think that Javi is actually probably still alive somewhere. I don't know how he survived up to this point, if maybe he found another group or something, but if Lottie is saying that he's alive, I think that he is alive somehow, some way, and we'll see him, I'm sure, probably later on in this season. From there, we end up going back to the present day where that girl ends up coming back in to check on Nat, and when she does, Nat ends up stabbing her and ends up escaping the building that she was in. Then we go back to the 90s again where we see Ty and Van, they're sleeping in the cabin when all of a sudden Ty goes to kiss Van but then bites her, wakes up out of her trance. So obviously she wasn't, I thought for a second maybe she was actually awake doing that, but no, she was in whatever trance is going on, wakes up, Van kind of freaks out there for a second. So what the fuck is going on with Ty? Is she being possessed by something in the woods? But I don't know if that's necessarily the case because this is going on in the present day too with the adult version of Tai as well. So I don't know what's going on there, unless I know in some of the promo materials they mention that they brought the darkness back with them. So maybe somehow that darkness has followed them here to the present day and she's being possessed again by whatever was out in the woods with them. Who knows what's going on with her? I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts are. Definitely let me know your thoughts and theories on what's happening with Tai down below in the comments because I'm interested to hear your theories. And then Van ends up writing "I love you" on Tai's arm, and so you kind of have a little bit of a cute moment there where Tai ends up eventually saying it back. But I'm curious what ends up happening with these characters because as we know in present day, those characters aren't alive and we know that we are going to see the adult version of Van. So what happened with those two characters? Another interesting thing, I'm curious to see how that plays out in the future. The episode then finally starts to wrap up where Nat sees Lottie's cult performing this weird ritual where they take all of his clothes off, burying him in the ground. They're all wearing these animal masks, which for me reminded me of a couple of years ago. We got the remake of Pet Sematary where the kids were wearing those animal masks. So definitely gave me vibes of that movie for sure. So we see them, putting the guy in the ground, and then Nat goes over to confront Lottie. And when she does, Lottie says, "I have a message for you from Travis." We then see Kelly ends up opening the grill and finds a piece of Adam's license in there. So obviously shit's going to go down with that whole situation. And then we see Travis and Nat. They're again out in the woods trying to look for Javi. And finally we see Shauna. She pulls out Jackie's ear out of her pocket. And I just knew as soon as she was looking at that thing, I was like, oh shit, are we finally going to go there? She looks at it. And then she pops the ear in her mouth, starts eating it, and just hints at things, I think, of what to come in this season. So that's how episode 1 of season 2 ends. So I think we're off to a great start here. There's definitely a lot going on. So I want to hear what your guys' thoughts and theories are based off what we've seen in this first episode. What's going on with the characters, what we think is going to happen maybe for the rest of season 1. So definitely let me know down below in the comments. Again, I'm going to be doing these videos every single week, so if you guys are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all these new videos. Like I said, I do have some interviews last season, so make sure to check those out. I'm going to be having some of the cast members from the show coming on this season, so I can't wait to share those with you guys. I'm just so excited that Yellowjackets is back. It was one of my favorite shows of last year, so I'm really excited to talk all things about the show with you guys. So again, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you guys can, hit the thumbs up button so that way you help out the video. And as always guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.